The first Fatal Frame game was a good horror game, but a little flawed in execution. In my review, I noted that Fatal Frame had several sequels, and it was my hope that the issues in the first one would be ironed out and the strengths polished up in the sequels, giving us a really solid horror game. Lo and behold, that's pretty much what Fatal Frame 2 Crimson Butterfly does. The premise is a pair of twins, Mio and Mayu Amakura, are visiting their childhood playing grounds before it is lost due to the construction of a new dam, when they suddenly and unexpectedly find themselves in an abandoned village, which is full of restless spirits. Mio, the twin you play as, is trying to find a way out of the village, while Mayu feels like she's being called by the spirits of the village. And so it's up to Mio to make her way through the village, protect her sister from the ghosts haunting the place, and try to find some way for both of them to escape. The plot is unconnected to the events of the first game and works as a standalone story. That being said, it does reuse a lot of plot elements and ideas from the first game, but it pulls it off a lot better. Firstly, I mostly understood what was going on, and things made sense, for the most part. And secondly, the game does a much better job of making us sympathize with the plight of the restless spirits that used to live in the village, and, crucially, showing how it is relevant to what is happening to our protagonists. I also love how the game does a good job of characterizing the two sisters, a lot of it conveyed solely through the gameplay. Mio, as the one being controlled by the player, is more bold, charging ahead and taking the initiative. Mayu, on the other hand, is more timid and submissive, following behind Mio and being more frightened when danger is present. It does an excellent job of conveying both of their personalities without a single word being said, and it also establishes their connection with each other. There are several sections where the sisters are separated, when Mio is alone and trying to get back to her sister, and you really feel the urgency that she feels about wanting to find her sister and make sure she's safe. While the first game also had the main character searching for her sibling, Crimson Butterfly does it better because we actually get to see the connection firsthand, rather than just being told about it. The overall gameplay is largely the same as in the first game. In the first house the girls investigate, they find the special camera from the last game, and Mio must use it to fight off the ghosts that appear. Much of the game consists of exploring the different locations, solving puzzles, and collecting keys to unlock the way forward. Pretty standard stuff as far as survival horror games go, but like the first game, it has a masterfully unnerving atmosphere, and the ghosts do a good job of adding to it. As in the first game, some ghosts will actually help you, by giving you hints or showing you the way forward. Others don't seem to be aware of your presence and are off doing their own thing. Plenty of them are hostile, though, and you will need to fight them off with the camera. The ghost encounters are effectively nerve-wracking and tense, as their movements can be hard to predict, and different ghosts will behave differently. When encountering the ghosts outdoors or in large rooms, it isn't too bad, as you can clearly see them and have room to move around. But there are a number of encounters that take place in small rooms or cramped hallways, and since the ghosts can walk through walls but you can't, you often won't be able to tell where they're coming from until the last moment, which is really creepy. And as scary as the openly hostile ghosts can be, it's sometimes even more unnerving when the ghosts aren't intentionally hostile. Some of the ghosts just seem to want to play, or even begging for help, and don't seem to realize that they're hurting you, so you feel a little bad about having to use the camera on them, while also feeling thoroughly creeped out at the same time. And the game does a good job of mixing things up with each encounter. Some ghosts can teleport around, while others can't. Some attack in groups, while others attack you alone. There's a few ghosts that are immune to the effects of the camera, and so you have to quickly run away from them before they can get you. There's even a brief section where you lose the camera, and have to avoid and run away from the ghosts until you can retrieve it. But what makes the game really good is that it paces itself properly. While the first game was scary, the ghosts appeared just often enough to start being a little annoying, especially once they start becoming more and more difficult to defeat. But the second game spaces the ghost encounters out more, so that you'll spend a fair amount of time just wandering through the abandoned houses looking for a key or trying to solve a puzzle, with the tension and dread gradually mounting, until after a little while you encounter a ghost. And after it's defeated, you'll have a temporary reprieve, and the tension and dread mount again. While the first game took place inside a single mansion, this game takes place throughout a small village. It still gives you the same sense of being trapped, but with more areas to explore, and very little recycling of locations. You do sometimes have to go back to previous houses or locations to make progress, but it's not to the same extent as the first game, and for the most part you're constantly uncovering and exploring new places. I also like how the music is handled. While the music in the first game was really good and appropriately atmospheric and haunting, the transitions from area to area could be a little awkward, with tracks from different areas abruptly stopping and starting as you move through the house. In this game, the transitions are handled much smoother, as the music of one area will fade out before the music of the new area will fade in, and it flows much better. Fatal Frame Crimson Butterfly does so much right, and like with Silent Hill 2, I can't really go into more detail about what makes it so great without going into spoilers. but there are a handful of areas where it falls short, and it's worth going over them. While the ghost encounters in this game overall are better than the encounters in the first game, the ghosts in the first game were more ethereal. They were harder to spot, harder to see, and it was hard to tell exactly what they looked like. As a result, your imagination helped fill in the blanks and make things even scarier. In this game though, the ghosts are much less ethereal, and it's much easier to spot them and tell what they look like. While the designs of the ghosts are overall really good, and they are effectively scary, being able to see them so clearly does undermine the mystery and fear a bit, and it does make it much more obvious when the game is recycling certain character models. Another problem is that the game is a little too easy. Now, as I've said, difficulty in a horror game is a tricky balancing act. You do want to challenge the player so that they do feel threatened by the game, but at the same time you want to avoid actually killing the player as much as possible, as dying too much will take away the fear of the experience and just make it annoying. The first game went too far with the challenge, as it made the ghosts harder and harder to beat, thus ruining the fear by making the game frustrating. Crimson Butterfly, though, goes a little too far in the other direction. While the distribution of film is reasonable, the game is way too generous with healing items. The game was still scary and wonderfully atmospheric, but the fear was slightly undermined by the knowledge that I had plenty of healing items and I could tank just about anything the ghosts had to throw at me. The only times I died in the game were when I encountered the extremely powerful ghosts that can kill you in one hit, and those were some of the scariest parts of the game. Outside of that though, I was never really worried about dying. I never ran out of healing items, and the only time I came close to running out was toward the end of the game, and by then you don't really care because, well, it's almost over. So I think the game would have been better if it had cut the number of healing items it leaves lying around in half. But while it isn't perfect, the things it does right more than outweigh the few things it does wrong. It's a little slow-paced, and I can understand why it might not be for everyone. But on the whole, it's a damn good horror game, with excellent characters, an involving storyline, and gameplay that is consistently engaging if not always fun in the traditional sense. A must-play for horror fans, and it's become one of my favorite titles for the PS2. My final score is an 8 out of 10. Doesn't quite top Silent Hill 2, but it comes close. It does have better voice acting than Silent Hill 2, though, I'll say that. So what do you think? Have you played Fatal Frame Crimson Butterfly? What did you think of it? Whatever you think, be sure to let me know in the comments below. If you like what I do, feel free to subscribe and follow me on Twitter. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.